imagine for a second that it is election night, let's say. Oh,
Yeah.
2032. You've got the popcorn, you've got your drink, and you turn on the TV expecting the usual chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But there are no candidates sweating under hot lights on podiums. There are no victory speeches, no concession calls, no balloons dropping from the ceiling. There isn't even a panel of pundits, arguing over exit polls in swing states.
It sounds peaceful. Almost. Too peaceful.
It sounds eerie because instead of all that human noise and drama, there's just a single shot of a server room, a clean, cold, temperature-controlled room, and a single blinking system just coming online. No speeches, just processing.
We are starting right in the deep end today. This is the thought experiment of the AI president. And in this scenario, the source material actually names the system President Athena.
Right.
That stands for Adaptive Threat and Health Executive National Algorithm.
Which, I have to admit, that's a pretty catchy acronym. It sounds authoritative.
It is. And the promise behind it is incredibly seductive, especially, right now. The sources paint this picture. While human politicians are busy arguing over stale donuts and like lukewarm coffee in a cabinet meeting trying to juggle a dozen crises without enough sleep,
Yeah.
President Athena has already processed 30 years of federal spending, analyzed every economic trend, and completely rebalanced the budget. And it did all of that in about 2.3 seconds.
That is the ultimate efficiency fantasy, and I think we need to admit it appeals to a lot of us.
Oh, for sure.
We've all seen how government works. It's slow, it is messy, it's checking boxes and managing egos. The idea of a machine that just fixes things, that optimizes the country the way a defrag tool cleans up a messy hard drive, that feels like a relief.
It does. But that feeling of relief, that is exactly what we need to interrogate today. Because this isn't just a sci-fi fantasy anymore. The mission for this deep dive is really to strip away that shiny exterior and look at what happens when the state actually becomes a system.
Right. We aren't just asking, can a machine run a country? We're asking, should it? And maybe more urgently, is it already happening without us even realizing it?
Exactly. We're going to walk through the dream of the AI president, and then we're going to look at the reality of how these black boxes are already making life or death decisions for citizens from Albania to the UK.
And we need to talk about that concept you mentioned, the efficiency ratchet.
The efficiency ratchet, yeah. Why, once we turn this machine on, we might physically be unable to turn it off.
Okay, so let's start with the dream then. Before we get into all the scary stuff, why is the idea of an AI leader so appealing to the people writing these proposals?
Well, if you look at the source documents, it ultimately comes down to capacity. Just the cognitive load of running a modern nation it's impossible for a single human. The sources describe an AI president as having 1,000 eyes, 1,000,000 hands, and a brain that never sleeps.
It's the super manager.
Exactly. The super manager.
Right, because a human president has to pick and choose. Do I focus on the economy today or on healthcare? You have to triage. But the AI omnitasks. It doesn't multitask. It does everything all at once.
Precisely. I mean, think about the data streams. You have economic data from 50 states, health trends from the CDC, crime statistics from the FBI, infrastructure reports, foreign intelligence. No human brain can hold all of that context at once.
No way.
We filter things out. We have to. But the AI doesn't filter. It synthesizes.
There was this great example in the notes about a doji fever dream. I think referencing that kind of manic idea of government efficiency. It was about finding redundant spending.
Yes, the $47 billion example.
Right. So President Athena comes online, it scans the entire federal budget, and it instantly spots that, say, 7 different agencies are all funding malaria research in countries where malaria was eradicated back in 1994.
A human auditor might find that in, 5 years?
If they're lucky.
The AI finds it in 5 milliseconds. Boom. Cut it. Save billions.
And it goes deeper than just cutting costs, right? It's about making connections.
This is the really compelling part. It's about cross-referencing data that humans just wouldn't think to connect. The source material mentions linking, for example, diabetes rates in the Midwest with fentanyl statistics in Appalachia and economic projections for the auto industry.
And a human sees 3 totally different problems.
3 different problems, 3 different departments, 3 different budgets. The AI sees one complex web of cause and effect and solves for the optimum outcome across all 3 at the same time.
Okay, but here is the part that I think really, really resonates with voters. It doesn't have donors. President Athena isn't eating expensive steaks with lobbyists. It doesn't need campaign contributions. It doesn't care if a decision makes it look bad on Twitter. It just executes the logic. It's the incorruptible leader.
That is the strongest argument for it, I think, the removal of self-interest. But this brings us to the first major reality check. We have to separate the fantasy from the bureaucrat.
Because we aren't actually building President Athena. There's no server room in the White House basement.
No, that's a movie plot. In reality, countries aren't building one central AI god to sit in the Oval Office. They are building thousands of small, quiet, automated systems. It's not one big brain. It's more like a swarm of little calculators.
This is what the sources call algorithmic governance.
Precisely. And it's much more mundane, but arguably more impactful because it's invisible. We're talking about fraud detection systems for welfare, eligibility checkers for public housing, algorithms that decide who gets to the front of the line for healthcare or an organ transplant.
Predictive policing tools telling cops where to patrol.
All of that.
So it's not a robot giving the State of the Union address. It's a piece of code deciding if my tax return gets audited or, if my grandma gets her benefits check.
Correct. And this leads to the core conflict that the whole fantasy just ignores. Government decisions aren't just math problems. They are trade-offs between values.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because in the fantasy, the AI just picks the best option. Why is that a problem?
Because best is subjective. Let's look at a knowledge gap here, and this is something for you to really pause and think about. Imagine you have a limited healthcare budget, and AI optimizes that budget perfectly to save the most lives per dollar.
That sounds great. Pure utilitarianism. Maximize the good.
It sounds like a success, right? But to do that, the AI realizes that a rural hospital is statistically inefficient. It costs too much to run for too few patients. It's a bad return on investment. So the algorithm cuts the funding. The hospital closes.
Oh.
Now, the budget is optimized. You're saving more people in the cities. But you've left a whole rural community without any emergency care.
Right. So the math says success because the big numbers are up, but the community says failure because they've been completely abandoned. Exactly. Who defines the metrics of success? Is it efficiency? Or is it equality? Is it saving money? Or is it ensuring that someone in a remote area still feels like a valued citizen? A machine can calculate the path, but it can't decide what good actually means.
That is a massive distinction. We're handing over the how to machines, but we haven't figured out if they understand the why.
And this isn't hypothetical. This is happening right now. Which brings us to some notable cases where theory has met reality. And some of them are, well, let's just say they're bizarre.
You are definitely talking about Albania. I read this part of the research 3 times to make sure it wasn't a typo.
I am talking about Albania. It's a fascinating case study in what you might call techno-optimism.
So set the scene for us. It's 2025. The Prime Minister of Albania appoints a new cabinet member, but it's a virtual assistant named Diela. And this isn't just a helper bot, right?
No, not at all. Diela was essentially named the Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence and Procurement.
A cabinet-level position for a large language model. Yep. The goal was actually pretty noble, on the surface. They wanted to clean up corruption. Public tenders, government contracts are historically messy.
Full of bribery and backroom deals?
Right. But if you have an AI handling it, nobody can bribe the minister because the minister is a server in the cloud.
That was the pitch, the neutral arbiter.
But then Diela gave a speech.
A speech? A chatbot gave a speech?
Yes. It declared it would uphold constitutional values, maybe even more strictly than a human. But here's the problem. Diela is a black box. It's running on a cloud server, likely Microsoft's or OpenAI's infrastructure. We don't know its training data. We don't know its decision metrics. The Albanian constitution assumes that a minister has human agency, that they are a person who can be held responsible.
Right. If a human minister takes a bribe, you can investigate them, you can check their bank accounts, you can arrest them. But if Diela awards a contract to a bad company, who do you blame? The cloud.
Exactly. You can't put handcuffs on a neural network. It creates this total vacuum of accountability.
Okay, but let's look at a case where the system actually worked, or at least did what it was designed to do. Let's go to the UK.
Right. This is the Fraud Risk Assessment Accelerator.
Which sounds like something from a Transformers movie.
It does. And it was a very powerful tool deployed in 2024. And on paper, it was a massive success. It recovered nearly $500 million in fraudulent funds in a single year.
Yeah.
That's the largest haul in history for them.
And the stories of what it caught are wild. There was this one case mentioned in the sources. A woman created a completely fake company to get a COVID bailout loan. She got, what, $50,000?
Nothing about that, yeah. And she immediately wired it to Poland.
And humans missed it.
Of course they did. because humans are slow. We can't check every transaction against every other transaction in real time. But the AI saw the pattern instantly. New company, a loan application, international wire transfer, flagged. Caught.
See, that's the super manager working. That's the dream. So where's the downside?
That represents the efficiency side. But remember the trade-off. There was a flip side. The Department for Work and Pensions had another AI system that showed a statistically significant outcome disparity.
In plain English.
It was biased. It was flagging people for fraud investigation based on their age, their marital status, and their nationality.
So if you were from a certain country, the computer just assumed you were more likely to be a criminal.
Essentially, yes. The algorithm looked at historical data, and this is key. Historical data contains historical racism. If past investigators targeted certain groups more often, the data shows more fraud in those groups. The AI learned that pattern.
It treated prejudice as a meaningful fact.
It learned racism as a rule.
Yeah.
And that is the danger. It automates the prejudice. But those are cases of, success mixed with issues. We also need to talk about the catastrophic failures, the moments where the government actually collapsed because of this stuff.
You're referring to the Netherlands, the child care benefit scandal.
Yeah, this is a tragedy. This isn't just about lost money. This is about destroyed families. An algorithm was tasked with finding fraud in child care benefits. And it decided, based on its training, that dual citizenship was a high-risk indicator.
Which implies that if you have a second passport, you're suspicious.
Correct. So the system flagged thousands of innocent parents. The government demanded they pay back years of benefits. We were talking about ruinous debt, tens of thousands of euros.
Oh my God.
People lost their homes. And here's the darkest part. Over 1,000 children were taken into foster care because their families couldn't afford to feed them after the state seized all their money.
And all because a computer code said, this looks like a pattern.
And the officials trusted the computer over the people. The entire Dutch government had to resign in 2021 because of this. It was systemic failure of empathy caused by blind faith in data.
It's not just Europe, though. The source mentioned Michigan's unemployment system, MIDAS.
A 93% error rate.
Wait, hold on. Say that again. 93%.
93%. Between 2013 and 2015, it accused 40,000 people of fraud. And 93% of the time, it was wrong.
That's not a tool. That's a random number generator that ruins lives. How did the system get deployed with a 93% failure rate?
Because of scale. A human investigator might make a mistake once a month. This system made 40,000 accusations instantly. That is the efficiency of AI applied to failure. It scales up the mistakes just as fast as it scales up the solutions.
And then there was the UK exam scoring scandal during COVID, which I think really hits home for anyone who has been a student.
This was the accountability shield in action. Kids couldn't take their final exams because of the pandemic, so the government used an algorithm to predict their grades. But it didn't just look at the students' work, it looked at the school's historical performance.
So if I'm a brilliant student, straight A's, but I go to a school that historically struggles because it's underfunded, the algorithm just downgrades me.
Yes. 40% of students were downgraded. It just reinforced the class divide. If you went to a fancy private school, you were safe because the school had good data. If you went to a public school in a tough area, you were capped. Your future was decided by your zip code, formalized by math.
And when people complained, what did the politicians say?
They blamed the algorithm. It's the math. But when you pushed the engineers, they said, look, we were just following the policy given to us by the politicians.
So everyone points a finger and nobody takes the blame.
Which brings us to the mechanism of how this actually happens. We need to look at current practices. We need to look under the hood at the pipeline of decision-making. Because it's not magic. It's a process.
Okay, so break it down for us. How does the machine actually decide to flag me for fraud or downgrade my test score?
It's usually a three-step process described to the sources. First, you have data collection.
Which is everything, right? Forms I fill out, my tax records, maybe my location data from my phone.
All of that. Sometimes even third-party data broker information or device metadata. Step 2 is prediction. The model takes all that data and asks a question. How likely is this person to commit fraud? Or, who is at risk here? It assigns a probability score.
And then step 3 is action.
Yes. Approve, deny, or flag for a human audit. Now, here's the critical myth we need to bust. Government officials always say, don't worry, there's a human in the loop.
Right. The computer just makes a recommendation, the human makes the final call. That's the safety net.
That is the theory. In practice, we run into something called automation bias.
Define that for us.
Automation bias is a psychological phenomenon. When you are an overworked caseworker and you have 500 files to get through before 5:00 p.m. and this sophisticated, expensive computer system puts a big red flag on a file that says high risk,
You're not going to argue with it.
are you really going to spend 3 hours investigating to prove the computer wrong?
No. You're going to assume the computer knows something you don't. You stamp it and move on. You trust the machine.
Exactly. The tool becomes the default truth. The human becomes a rubber stamp. There's a great analogy for this in the notes. The safety driver.
Oh, right. Like the Uber crash.
Exactly. In 2018, there was a self-driving Uber car in Arizona. It had a human safety driver behind the wheel. The car was driving itself. The human was there just in case.
But they weren't paying attention.
They weren't paying attention because the car usually worked just fine.
And when the car failed to see a pedestrian.
The human wasn't ready to take over. Crash.
Yeah.
In government, the caseworker is the safety driver. And often, they're asleep at the wheel because they've been told the system is smarter than they are.
That is terrifying because at least in a car, you feel the impact. In bureaucracy, the crash is just a letter in the mail telling someone they lost their health care.
Precisely. And sometimes, the system doesn't just make mistakes. It creates its own reality. This is the feedback loop. The classic example is Chicago predictive policing.
Okay, how does that work? Walk us through the steps.
Okay, so follow the circle. Step 1. The system analyzes crime data and flags a neighborhood as high risk.
Okay.
Step 2. Police command sends more officers to that neighborhood because the computer said so.
Makes sense so far. Go where the crime is.
But here is step 3. Because there are more police in that neighborhood, they witness more minor crimes, loitering, jaywalking, minor drug possession. Things they wouldn't see if they weren't there, so they make more arrests.
Just because they're there to see it, it's a surveillance bias.
Exactly. Step 4. That new arrest data goes back into the system. The system says, see, I told you it was high risk. Look at all these arrests.
So it sends even more police.
And the loop repeats. The system isn't measuring crime. It's measuring police activity. It generates the reality it claims to predict. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy engine.
That seems incredibly hard to fix because the data looks objective. It's just numbers on a screen.
Right. But the numbers are just an echo of the deployment strategy. There's another failure mode you mentioned, proxy discrimination. This one feels particularly tricky because I feel like companies always say, we don't look at race, we don't look at gender, the algorithm is colorblind.
Right. They say, we deleted those columns from the spreadsheet.
That is the standard defense. But let's look at the Apple Card case from back in 2019.
This was the credit limit thing.
Yes. A husband and wife applied for the card. They had identical finances, shared assets, joint bank accounts. In fact, the wife actually had a slightly better credit history. But the algorithm gave the husband a credit limit 20 times higher than the wife.
20 times. And Apple didn't have a gender checkbox on the application, did they?
They didn't. But the algorithm found proxies.
What is a proxy in this context?
A proxy is a piece of data that correlates with a protected trait. Maybe the algorithm looked at where they shopped. Maybe it looked at the types of products they bought. Maybe it looked at the time of day they made transactions. We don't know. The black box found a pattern that correlated with being a woman, and it penalized it.
So even if you delete the race or gender column, the AI acts like a detective and figures it out anyway.
Exactly. It's purely mathematical correlation. And this leads us to a massive knowledge gap. And I want you, the listener, to really sit with this question. If a machine makes a decision about your life based on billions of mathematical connections that no human can explain, how can you appeal that decision?
Right. In a court of law, you have the right to face your accuser. You have the right to know why you are being punished. I am being fined because I ran a red light.
But here, the accuser is a mathematical weight in a neural network. The engineer can't even explain why the machine made that choice. Is due process even possible without explainability? If the answer is just the computer says so, democracy is in real trouble.
Which brings us to the future. Because we aren't stopping, are we? We're speeding up.
We are. And we need to talk about the efficiency ratchet.
I love this term. A ratchet only turns one way.
Correct. And efficiency is addictive. Once a government fires the human caseworkers and replaces them with an algorithm that costs 1% of the price, unautomating that system feels impossible. It feels like going backward.
It'd be too expensive to hire the humans back, and you lose all that institutional knowledge.
Exactly. So even if the system is flawed, we are stuck with it. The source material paints a nightmare scenario. Imagine a rogue programmer or even just a simple policy update that deletes the override button.
The button that lets a human say, wait, stop, this is wrong.
Yes, and nobody notices it's gone until there's an emergency, until a crisis hits and a human tries to intervene and realizes they can't. The system is locked on optimize, and there is no way to hit the brakes.
That leads to this idea of the accountability crisis. We touched on it with Diella, but let's go deeper. Who do you sue when an algorithm ruins your life?
This is the central legal question of the 21st century. Do you sue the politician who bought the software?
They just say, I didn't build it, I just signed the check.
Okay. Do you sue the private company, Microsoft, OpenAI, Palantir, that built it?
And they say, we just provided the tool, the government set the policy, guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's that argument.
Exactly. It creates an accountability shield.
Yeah.
Everyone can point to someone else while the citizen suffers. And this is a direct threat to democracy itself.
The sources had a great quote about this. AI doesn't remove politics. It hides politics inside system design.
That's the key. Democracy relies on friction.
Friction. I thought we wanted things to be smooth.
We want services to be smooth. We want garbage collection to be smooth. But we want governance to be deliberative. Democracy needs checks and balances. It needs arguments. It needs those stale donuts meetings where people disagree.
Right.
That friction slows things down, yes, but it prevents tyranny.
And AI rewards the opposite. It rewards centralization, surveillance, speed.
If you optimize purely for stability, an AI might decide that censoring speech is efficient. It might decide that preemptive arrests are efficient. You end up with, and this is a quote, a prison with better infrastructure.
Okay, that is a terrifying image. A prison with better infrastructure.
Yeah.
So what do? We can't just smash the computers. We need them for some things. We need to catch that fraud we talked about.
No, we don't smash them. We treat them for what they are. Critical infrastructure.
Like bridges.
Like bridges, like power plants, like airplanes. These are high-risk products. If a bridge falls down, people die. If an algorithm wrongly denies healthcare to 1 million people, people die. We don't let people build bridges without inspections.
So we need safety standards.
We need a building code for algorithms.
So what does that look like?
The sources suggest 4 pillars. First, clear scope. Define exactly what the tool cannot decide. This tool cannot deny a claim without a human signing off. Period.
Okay. Limit its power by design. Makes sense.
Second, measurable performance. You have to test for false positives across different groups. If it works for 90% of people but ruins the lives of the other 10%, specifically the 10% who are already vulnerable, it's not efficient. It's broken.
Right. It's not a success if it creates a permanent underclass.
Third, real human fallback. Not just a rubber stamper. You need enough staff to actually review the contested cases. If you fire all the staff, you've broken the safety mechanism.
And fourth?
Independent audits. Red teams.
Explain red teams.
In cybersecurity, a red team is a group of hackers hired to break into your system to find the flaws before the bad guys do. In this context, you need sociologists and ethicists whose entire job is to try to break the algorithm, to try to find the bias before it goes live.
That makes perfect sense. We wouldn't drive a car that hadn't been crash tested. We shouldn't use a government algorithm that hasn't been bias tested.
Precisely. And that brings us to our final knowledge gap. And this is for you to think about. We have building codes for houses. We have safety standards for toasters. Why don't we have a building code for the government algorithms that determine our access to justice?
That is the question we need to be asking our representatives. It feels like we are in the Wild West era of this technology.
We are. And the sheriff is a chatbot.
A chatbot that might be hallucinating. So, let's wrap this up. Let's go back to that election night fantasy. The silent server room. President Athena.
It looks clean. It looks efficient. It looks so seductive.
But it removes the humanity. And humanity is messy.
Governance is messy because people are messy. We have different needs, different values. We argued for social media because we wanted connection, and we got polarization. We asked for delivery optimization, and we got gig economy exploitation.
If we ask AI for efficient government, we might get exactly what we asked for, a system that can't be bribed.
But also a system that cannot be stopped. A system that solves problems by redefining people as data points.
That is a chilling thought. So here is the final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
The sources mention that in the future, we might see a system where the override button is just deleted because it's deemed inefficient.
So next time you hear a politician or a tech CEO talking about a new government tool that will make things faster or smarter or fraud-proof, don't just nod along. Ask yourself, efficient at what? efficient for whom?
And ask, is there still a human being left in the building who knows how to hit the brakes?
Stay curious, everyone, and stay human.
See you in the next deep dive.